Come in and sit down, Lester. Sharon, I can see you're keen to know more. To start with, I'd just like to say that we value volunteers highly and recognize their importance and assistance in the provision of quality education.
Thank you. We're looking forward to helping out, but what exactly can we do?
Volunteers can undertake a range of tasks. In general, they enrich the English language program and complement the contributions of salaried staff members.
Yes, but what would we do specifically?
Oh, a variety of tasks. For instance, you can tutor individual students in reading.
I thought that might be the case.
But you can also help students edit their written responses.
Great. Is that also a one-on-one activity?
Oh, yes, definitely. But volunteers are also called on to assist in designated classes.
And what exactly would we do there?
Well, it depends on the class, of course, but usually you take on the role of an assistant.
A teacher's assistant.
Yes, that's it.
Sounds like fun and good preparation for our own careers.
Then, an enormous area of assistance is developing students' organizational skills.
Yes, I can imagine that's why some of them are struggling in the first place.
There's also the special needs unit. They always need volunteers there.
But we have no training in special needs.
That's not necessary. These students just really appreciate having any extra attention. Sometimes help with the simplest things, like holding a pen correctly.
Well, that's something all able-bodied students should learn. I've noticed some of the strangest pen grips amongst my peers, and I'm sure they must end up with sore hand or shoulder muscles at the end of the day.
Yes, I'm sure you're right. The other task I'd like you two to help out with is encouraging and improving the students' work ethic.
Oh, I can't imagine that'll be easy.
No, but it is important, and I can give you some training in that field.
That'll be good.
I should also point out that you'll be working alongside quality teachers at times who are not only caring role models, but excellent motivators.
Well, we should learn a lot from them.
Yes, the teachers you'll be assigned to are innovative and very responsive to the different needs of individual students.
If that's true, they must be adept at a variety of teaching styles.
Quite right. You know, part of my mission is to forge close partnerships between experienced teachers and trainees like yourselves. As far as I can see, everyone has something to gain from the exchange of information and skills, not just the students you're helping.
There are a number of interesting developments going on at the moment, and I've chosen you two because of your varied academic backgrounds. Now you, Sharon.
I majored in business studies before I came to Teachers Training College.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I've always been more interested in science, marine biology in particular.
Yes, I think it's quite exciting. The school you're going to assist at is augmenting the number of vocational learning experiences offered within its subjects. Educational philosophy these days seems to recognize the importance of increasing practical components in the curriculum. Areas of development being pursued include building and construction, agriculture, business education, and hospitality. But the Marine Studies course is already well developed.
Now I see where we fit in.
You'll find that the school has an excellent library and audio-visual collection. There are 3 computer laboratories and a special needs network with 6 stations.
They are well equipped.
Wait till you see their independent learning center.
What's so special about their ILC?
They have the most sophisticated self-learning software I've ever seen in this region of the country.
Really?
And there's a wide number of extracurricular activities, an extensive sporting program.
Oh, sport? Not my thing at all.
Well, no, maybe not. But they also promote students' participation in different scholastic competitions.
I'm impressed. I think we're going to enjoy this.
So, tell me about your research project, John.
I created a questionnaire for the study to determine people's opinions of the relative feasibility of earning a living in Brisbane.
Oh, cool. How is it scored? Are they all multiple choice questions?
Well, the questions consist primarily of yes or no responses. There are 2 free response questions at the end. Participants will use a computer to fill in their answers. That way, it is really easy to analyze the data afterward.
Great. It sounds like you have a pretty solid idea of what you should do. Just don't forget to submit a copy of your plans to Professor Curran by the 15th.
Oh, I almost forgot.
You don't do it for the high grade or appraise, but he can review and give you feedback.
Right, that will be helpful. He has been conducting studies like this for 30 years now.
Yep. Oh, and I'm curious. Are you going to be in the room giving subjects directions for the questionnaire?
Well, I think the instructions will be provided by another representative who will not be analysing the data. I want them to feel they can answer and be completely anonymous, so I will not be in the room. Anonymity is really important for this study.
I agree. Good idea. You should tell the representative to remind subjects to fully consider both sides of each issue. Sometimes it's really easy to immediately check yes or no without stopping to think about it completely.
That's so true. It's like a race to finish the questionnaire first or something. I'll make sure to include that in the instructions. This report has to be perfect.
Wow, what's the big deal? I know it's part of your grades and all.
Well, it's that, but also a well-executed study could grab the attention of faculty in the department, which would be a huge deal.
So, for attention?
No, silly. I mean, I could really gain the respect of professors who may later take me on as a graduate student in their labs.
Oh, I see. Let me take a look at the survey. Wow, this looks great. The map of the median income by region is a great tool. Where did you find it?
Well, thanks. I read a lot of sources and just noticed this one in a small psychology journal called Modern Psychology. It's more helpful than the photo I added, but I think the photo is just so interesting. It was in the newspaper last year during that huge wage strike.
It's great. Probably not necessary, but it looks great. I don't understand. What is WKRX's involvement here?
Oh, the radio station agreed to sponsor the study if I play their station in the room.
Wow, interesting. So you don't have to pay for any of this?
Exactly.
Nice. Where did you get that idea?
Last month, at the Psychology Club Council meeting, someone talked about how easy it is to get sponsorship from local businesses, so I listened to their advice and called around.
I'll have to remember that. Well, this all looks great. Good luck.
Hi, Ben.
Sally.
How are you?
Fine.
I wondered if I'd run into you. When did you get here?
I only arrived last night, just in time. I prefer to travel on Sundays to miss the working rush. I suppose you arrived in plenty of time.
Oh, I've been here for 4 days now, so it must have been Thursday that I arrived. I like to have a good chance to look around and settle in.
I should have come earlier too. I'm hoping to get a part-time job.
Well, you've no time today, I suppose. Do you still plan to be an architect?
Yes, it's what I've always wanted to do. And you were planning to do economics, weren't you?
Yes, I was, but now I've decided on psychology instead.
How many textbooks do you have to get? I've been given this long list, and I'm sure they'll cost a fortune. See?
That looks a lot. It's longer than my list.
Well, it's 14 all told. So I might use library copies instead of buying some of them. What about you?
I'll probably buy the whole lot of mine because I only have 5 on my list, although I'm sure there are many more I'll have to read.
Luckily, we don't have to read them all straight away. Have you got your class timetable yet?
It came with the book list. When do your lectures start?
Tuesday. That's tomorrow. How about yours?
Oh, I've got an extra day, the day after yours start. It's nothing like school, is it?
Not so far, and the lectures will certainly be different. Do you have any special approach for keeping up with lectures and the amount we have to read?
Well, I usually try to read every word in a book, in case I miss something important. So I suppose I'll try to write down every word of the lecture if I can.
Oh, I couldn't do that. I'd get cramp in my fingers, and I wouldn't really hear what was being said. I usually skim a book when I read, and underline key parts, so I guess I'll try to make notes on the main points of the lecture. Have you thought of using a cassette recorder?
You mean to record the lecture?
Yep. Then you could make really good notes.
Is it allowed?
I think so. It must be. Plenty of people seem to do it. It has to be better than trying to write every word as you listen.
Anyway, what's your first lecture about?
Oh, it's on the Industrial Revolution.
The Industrial Revolution? Sounds boring to me.
Not really. It made a big difference to everything, including architecture eventually. So what's your first lecture about?
It's about what separates humans from other animals.
Okay. Look, I was on my way to the library to check out some of these books on my list. I have a tutorial paper to give in a couple of weeks.
Oh, what's the topic?
Well, I think our lecturer must have trouble thinking up topics. The topic is, why study architecture?
I don't know. It could give you a chance to set out what you want to do.
I guess so. Have you been given any tutorials to do yet?
Yes. Mine is called Needs for Sleep.
Sounds almost as interesting as mine.
Excuse me, Dr. Thompson. May I speak to you for a minute?
Of course. Please come in.
I'm Alexandra Jones. I'm studying business here at the university, and for my assignment I have to carry out a survey of people who own their own organizations. I heard that you are the founder of your own company, and I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about it.
Yes, of course. Please fire away.
Okay, great. We'll get started. Did you encounter any problems whilst you were starting your company?
Actually, it was not as hard as I anticipated. I started out with very clear objectives, so I knew exactly what I wanted my corporate identity to be. It was very difficult to find the correct premises, as the property market in London is so competitive. But eventually, I found the perfect site. The hardest part was structuring the business, as I had no formal template, so I had to create it myself.
Yes, that is very impressive. Was it difficult dealing with staff?
It's always tricky trying to satisfy a group of people with varying interests. However, I didn't encounter many problems. I found it very important to make the staff feel appreciated. So I hosted a staff day where we could all introduce ourselves and get to know each other as individuals. I was also able to talk to them about the type of work that they would be doing and gave them the opportunity to share with me the issues they had with the allocation of the work.
Okay. Did you hire a management team, or did you take on the role of the manager?
Oh no, I already had enough tasks to take care of. I employed someone else to take on the role of the manager. However, he never consulted me before making decisions, so I was forced to let him go and hire someone else.
And what did the other staff think of the new manager?
They had a great deal of respect for him. It definitely helped that I consulted with them before hiring him. They were surprised that he has been so successful in his role at the company, despite the longer meeting hours.
Since the company opened, has it had any great achievements?
There are many aspects of the company that I am pleased with. However, there is one achievement of which I am particularly proud. I wanted a mural painted to brighten up our entrance area, so I decided it would be a great idea to invite the local primary school to create one for us. The youngsters had a great time, and I know they were thrilled to be included.
Oh, that's lovely. Have you encountered any major problems since you opened the company?
Yes, we are always encountering issues with employment because it is very hard to find people who are qualified for the roles that we are offering. But unfortunately, there is no solution to this. One of our administrators also recently left to go on maternity leave, which put us in a tricky situation. However, we have managed to find a temporary replacement for her. It's also now approaching the period when we must carry out our financial training, so I need to find a venue with enough space to hold everyone. It will be interesting trying to organize that event.
Oh gosh, I can imagine. I find it hard enough to organize myself.
Organization is a difficult thing to master, but it is also essential for success. Whilst I was learning how to stay organized, I realized that the role of motivation is essential.
Okay, that's great.
I also suggest that you visit the library, as there is a section on culture that will have some very valuable material on how to develop your organization skills.
Okay, I'll head to the library when we're finished.
I think you will find it very useful. They also have a collection of documentaries on the subject of personal organization, and I suggest that you look up the literature on management of change. I personally found these sources incredibly useful. Articles are also a valuable resource, and we have a whole collection of them in our university library. I advise that you look at Section 2, where you will find articles on the nature of volunteering.
That's great. Thank you so much for your help.
No problem.
Hi, Joanna. Good to meet you. Now, before we discuss your new research project, I'd like to hear something about the psychology study you did last year for your master's degree. So, how did you choose your subjects for that?
Well, I had 6 subjects, all professional musicians and all female. 3 were violinists, and there was also a cello player and a pianist and a flute player. They were all very highly regarded in the music world, and they'd done quite extensive tours in different continents, and quite a few had won prizes and competitions as well.
And they were quite young, weren't they?
Yes, between 25 and 29. The mean was 27.8. I wasn't specifically looking for artists who'd produced recordings, but this is something that's just taken for granted these days, and they all had.
Right. Now, you collected your data through telephone interviews, didn't you?
Yes. I realised if I was going to interview leading musicians, it'd only be possible over the phone because they're so busy. I recorded them using a telephone recording adapter. I'd been worried about the quality, but it worked out all right. I managed at least a 30-minute interview with each subject, sometimes longer.
Did doing it on the phone make it more stressful?
I'd thought it might. It was all quite informal, though, and in fact they seemed very keen to talk. And I don't think using the phone meant I got less rich data. Rather the opposite, in fact.
Interesting. And you were looking at how performers dress for concert performances?
That's right. My research investigated the way players see their role as a musician and how this is linked to the type of clothing they decide to wear. But that focus didn't emerge immediately. When I started, I was more interested in trying to investigate the impact of what was worn on those listening, and also whether someone like a violinist might adopt a different style of clothing from, say, someone playing the flute or the trumpet.
It's interesting that the choice of dress is up to the individual, isn't it?
Yes, you'd expect there to be rules about it in orchestras, but that's quite rare.
You only had women performers in your study. Was that because male musicians are less worried about fashion?
I think a lot of the men are very much influenced by fashion, but in social terms the choices they have are more limited. They'd really upset audiences if they strayed away from quite narrow boundaries.
Now, popular music has quite different expectations. Did you read Mike Frost's article about the dress of women performers in popular music?
No.
Well, he points out that a lot of female singers and musicians in popular music tend to dress down in performances and wear less feminine clothes, like jeans instead of skirts. And he suggests this is because otherwise they'd just be discounted as trivial.
But you could argue they're just wearing what's practical. I mean, a pop music concert is usually a pretty energetic affair.
Yes, he doesn't make that point, but I think you're probably right. I was interested by the effect of the audience at a musical performance when it came to the choice of dress.
The subjects I interviewed felt this was really important. It's all to do with what we understand by performance as a public event. They believed the audience had certain expectations, and it was up to them as performers to fulfil these expectations, to show a kind of esteem.
They weren't afraid of looking as if they'd made an effort to look good.
I think in the past, the audience would have had those expectations of one another too, but that's not really the case now. Not in the UK, anyway.
No.
And I also got interested in what sports scientists are doing too, with regard to clothing.
Musicians are quite vulnerable physically, aren't they? Because the movements they carry out are very intensive and repetitive, so I'd imagine some features of sports clothing could safeguard the players from the potentially dangerous effects of this sort of thing.
Yes, but musicians don't really consider it. They avoid clothing that obviously restricts their movements, but that's as far as they go.
Anyway, coming back to your own research, do you have any idea where you're going from here?
I was thinking of doing a study using an audience, including
Hey Jess, glad you could make it. We've got a lot to discuss.
Hi, Matt. Yes, sorry I'm a bit late. I did bring all my notes with me.
Yes, me too. Where shall we start?
Well, I think it would be a good idea to clarify our objectives just one more time.
Yes, good idea. Okay, here we are. We need to record, photograph, and identify the plant species in 10 1-square-meter plots.
Does it say anything about where these plots should be and how they should be laid out?
Ah, here it is. It says that all the plots need to be no more than 10 meters apart.
And how do we choose them?
Ah, this is the fun part. I remember this. Here we are. Make a 1-meter square frame using bamboo sticks available from the department stores.
Yes, we've already done that.
I know, I'm just reading the whole section.
Okay.
One person stands roughly in the middle of the chosen area and throws the frame. The other person uses a tape to mark out the square where the frame landed and returns frame to thrower. The thrower then turns a few degrees on the spot and throws again. The thrower must turn slightly after each throw and vary the force of the throw until after the 10th throw they are pointing in almost the same direction as the first.
That sounds a bit complicated.
That's only because it's all in writing. It's just a simple throw, turn, throw, turn, throw, turn until we have 10 squares.
And I guess you want to do the throwing.
Well, if you don't mind. I'm sure you'll be more accurate at marking the squares.
Yes, I'm sure I am, and I'm sure you've got a stronger throwing arm.
Okay, good. We've got that sorted. Now we need to decide where to go.
Yes, I've been thinking about that, and I've brought the map.
Ah, well done. I forgot mine.
Now, I've identified 3 possible locations, but they've all got some disadvantages.
Okay, fire away.
Well, the area around this lowland marsh could be interesting. There'll be a lot of interesting water plants here.
Looks good, but what's the problem?
Mainly that it's already a designated nature reserve, and I think there's already been a lot of research done here.
Ah, I see. Well, I'd rather do something that's new and can be useful.
I agree. That's why I identified this area further west. See, here, behind the beach.
Oh yes, I see. That area there, where it's flat, but quite high.
Exactly. If you look a bit further inland, you'll see that there are hills which will protect that area from strong north winds.
I see. Excellent. But what's the problem?
Just that it may not be very interesting. We know that the geology there is not conducive to a wide variety of plants.
I agree. So what's your last idea?
Well, I think this one is a bit of a winner, although I did want to show you the other 2. Look up here, on the north coast.
Where?
See this bay? Well, I know that there's been quite a lot of studies done here, but a bit further to the east, behind this headland. No one has ever looked at that. Well, I certainly couldn't see any studies.
That is interesting. And the plant life could be a bit different because of the shelter from the wind the headland provides.
Exactly.
Brilliant, Jessica. That's a great idea. We'll go there.
Hi Melanie, what did you think of the assignment that we got today? It looks interesting, doesn't it?
Yes, Ellen. I've always been interested in recycling, but there's a lot of research to do.
Yes, there are a lot of things I'm unsure of, so it's going to be good working with you.
Okay. Well, why don't we start by making a flowchart from the notes our tutor gave us?
Yes, so on one side we could have the paper production cycle, here on the left, and on the other side the recycling.
Good idea. Let's start at the top with the production. The first step in the process is to get the raw materials.
Yes, and they tend to come from pine forests.
Okay. And then the bark is removed from the outside of the tree, and after that the wood is chopped up. That's the first 3 stages.
It sounds a bit complicated after that. It says water is added, and then the mixture is heated and made into pulp. This will be the thick paste that is used to make paper.
Yes, you're right, because after that they use a machine to make the paper, and we can put that right in the centre of the flowchart, because it's also where the recycled paper joins the process.
Yes. So, once the paper has been produced in the machine, what happens then?
Well, I think we should write print as the next step, because this is when newspapers, magazines, etc. are produced. And we could also add that they have to be distributed to stores and people's homes.
Right. Then the recycling bit starts. The old paper's collected, and then it says it's taken somewhere so that someone or something can sort it. I imagine there are different kinds of paper, or things like paper clips that need to be removed.
Yes. Let's have a step after that. Now, how did our tutors say they do this? Oh yes, it involves chemicals. So, how is your chemistry?
Well, not very good, I'm afraid. But this is how they remove ink. So, this is definitely going to need a bit of research.
Right. The last step in the recycling section is similar to the last step in the production process, with heating and pulping, before the cycle begins again.
So, I think going through the processes helped. Now, we need to decide how we're going to do this assignment.
Yes. I guess what we need to do is take the processes and divide them up between us. But we could start thinking about an introduction.
Yes, okay. Well, I can start doing that. I think I have enough to go on already.
Good. And there are a few areas where we need a lot more information. I think I'll start with something easy. Let's say the paper collection. I could go to the resource centre to do some research.
Well, I think a better idea would be to approach someone who's involved in the process. What about contacting the council?
Oh, good idea. Yes, I'll do that instead. They're bound to have some information. And I know just the thing to add to our work to make it even more interesting.
And what's that?
Well, in my last assignment, I added a few pictures, and the feedback I got was that this wasn't academic enough. So what might really bring it to life would be to include some data, provided we can find some.
Yes, that sounds excellent. Well, we certainly have a lot to do, and not much time to do it in.
You're right. I think we have about 5 weeks, so I suggest we create a plan of work today. The end of the month is nearly 3 weeks away, and then we have a few days holiday.
Yes, so let's see if we can get the first draft done by then, so we can take a short break.
Okay, then after the break we'll have just over a week to complete it. I wonder if we could get someone to review our work for us a few days before the deadline, so we can make some final changes. What about your friend, Henry?
The best person would be our tutor. Henry's very good, but he's taking a whole week's holiday, and there won't be enough time when he returns.
Okay then, that's fine.
Hi, Robert.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. I was just printing off some pages about food waste in Britain.
Do you want to include Britain in the presentation? I thought we were concentrating on the USA.
It is a global problem, so I thought we ought to provide some statistics that show that.
Fair enough. What did you find out?
Well, I was looking at a British study from 2013. It basically concluded that £12 billion worth of food and drink was thrown away each year, all of it ending up in landfill sites. Over 8 million tons. And that wasn't including packaging.
An incredible amount.
Yes, and they were only looking at what households threw away, so there's no information about restaurants and the catering industry. But one thing the study did investigate was the amount of milk and soft drinks that were wasted, and I think it was probably quite unique in that respect.
Interesting. You know, in the other European reports I've read, there's one thing they have in common when they talk about carbon dioxide emissions.
I know what you are going to say. They never refer to the fuel that farms and factories require to produce the food, and the carbon dioxide that releases?
Exactly. We could really cut down on carbon emissions if less food was supplied in the first place. To my mind, the reports talk too much about the carbon dioxide produced by the trucks that deliver the fresh goods to the shop and take the waste away. They forget about one of the key causes of carbon dioxide.
Absolutely. If the reports are actually going to be useful to people, they need to be more comprehensive.
Who do you mean by people?
Well, the government, industries, people making television programs. Have you seen any documentaries about food waste?
Not that I remember.
My point exactly. These days, they all seem to be focusing on where your meat, fruit, and vegetables are sourced from. We're being encouraged to buy locally, not from overseas. That's probably a good thing, but I'd still like to see something about waste.
Yes, it's the same with magazine articles. It's all about fat and sugar content, and the kind of additives and coloring in food, but nothing about how it reaches your table and what happens after it ends up in the bin.
Well, we've only got 15 minutes for this presentation, so I think we'll have to limit what we say about the consequences of food waste. What do we want to concentrate on?
I know some of the other presentations are looking at food and farming methods and what they do to the environment, so I think we'll avoid that. And the fact that in some countries, people can't afford the food grown on their own farms. That was covered last term.
Okay, we don't want to repeat stuff.
What concerns me above all else is that in a recession, governments should be encouraging business to find ways to cut costs. Apparently, supermarkets in the USA lose about 11% of their fruit to waste. That's throwing money away.
All right, we'll focus on that problem. It should get the others' attention anyway. Now, how do you want to begin the presentation? Let's not start with statistics, though, because that's what everybody does.
I agree. How about we give the other students a set of questions to answer about what they suspect they waste every day?
I'm fine with that. Probably a better option than showing pictures of landfill sites. It'll be more personalized that way.
All right, now let's start.
Okay, shall we now have a look at the projects that different researchers and organizations are working on?
For me, the project I really liked was the one at Tufts University. You know, where they've invented tiny edible patches to stick on fresh foods that show you what level of bacteria is present, and so whether you can still eat it.
It's a great idea, as it tells you if you need to hurry up and eat the food before it goes off. The other good thing about the patches is that apparently they'll be cheap to manufacture.
Good. Then the other thing I thought was great was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology project.
I hadn't seen that.
Well, they've developed these sensors that can detect tiny amounts of ethylene. Ethylene is the natural plant hormone in fruit that makes them turn ripe, apparently. The researchers think that they can attach the sensors to cardboard boxes, and then supermarkets can scan the sensors with a portable device to see how ripe the fruit inside is. That's got to be a quicker way to check for ripeness than taking each box off the shelf and opening it.
Definitely. And I thought that Lean Path was worth mentioning too. Their waste tracking technology means that caterers can see how much food is being wasted and why. That'll increase profits for them eventually.
Yes. And did you read about 0%? They've produced this smartphone application that allows restaurants to send donation alerts to food charities. The charities can then pick up the unwanted food and distribute it to people in need.
In the long run, that'll definitely benefit poorer families in the neighborhood. No kid should go to school hungry.
I agree. And I read that quite a few local governments in the USA are thinking about introducing compulsory composting in their states, so you can't put any food waste into your rubbish bins, just the compost bin.
Well, I guess that means a bit more work for people. I mean, they have to separate the organic and inorganic waste themselves before they take it out to the compost bin, and you know how lazy some people are. But I guess if we all start composting, we'd be doing something positive about the problem of food waste ourselves, rather than relying on the government to sort it out. Having said that,
Oh, good morning. You must be James. I'm Beth Cartwright. Please call me Beth.
Thank you.
Now, as this is your first tutorial since you started on the Scandinavian Studies course, I'd like to find out something about you. Why did you decide to take this course?
Well, my mother is Danish, and although we always lived in England, she used to talk about her home a lot, and that made me want to visit Denmark. We hardly ever did, though. My mother usually went on her own. But whenever her relations or friends were in England, they always came to see us.
I see. So I assume you already speak Danish, one of the languages you'll be studying?
I can get by when I talk to people, though I'm not terribly accurate.
Now, you probably know that you'll spend the third year of the course abroad. Have you had any thoughts about that?
I'm really looking forward to it. And although Denmark seems the obvious place to go because of my family connections, I'd love to spend the time in Iceland.
Oh, I'm sure it can be arranged. Do you have any plans for when you graduate? A lot of students go on to take a master's degree.
I think the 4 years of the undergraduate course will be enough for me. I'm interested in journalism, and I quite like the idea of moving to Scandinavia and writing for magazines. I'd find that more creative than translating, which I suppose most graduates do.
Okay. Now, how are you finding the courses you're taking this term, James?
Well, I'm really enjoying the one on Swedish cinema.
That'll continue next term, but the one on Scandinavian literature that's running at the moment will be replaced by more specialized courses. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in watching Danish television programs, there's going to be a course on that the term after next.
That sounds good.
Have you started thinking about the literature paper that you have to write in the next few weeks?
Yes, my first choice would be to do something on the Icelandic sagas.
The trouble with that is that a lot of people choose that topic, and it can be difficult to get hold of the books you'll need. Why not leave that for another time?
Right.
You might find modern novels or 19th century playwrights interesting.
I've read or seen several plays in translation, so that would be a good idea.
Fine. I'll put you down for that topic.
Right. So what would you advise me to aim at in a paper?
First, I suggest you avoid taking one writer and going into a great deal of detail. That approach certainly has its place, but I think you first need to get an understanding of the literature in the context of the society in which it was produced, who it was written for, how it was published, and so on. I also think that's more fruitful than placing it within the history of the genre.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Could I ask for some advice about writing the paper I'm working on about the Vikings? I have to do that this week, and I'm a bit stuck.
Of course. Have you decided yet what to write about?
No, I haven't. There's so much that seems interesting. Viking settlement in other countries, trade, mythology.
Well, what I suggest is that you read an assignment a student wrote last year, which is kept in the library. It's short and well-focused, and I'm sure you'll find it helpful. I'll give you the details in a moment. Textbooks usually cover so many topics, it can be very difficult to choose just one.
Okay. I've got a DVD of the film about the Vikings that came out earlier this year. Should I watch that again?
If it's the one I am thinking of, I'd ignore it. It's more fantasy than reality. But I've got a recording of a documentary that you should watch. It makes some interesting and provocative points, which I think will help you to focus your topic.
Right. So then, should I work out an outline?
Yes, just headings for different sections at this stage. And then you should start looking for suitable articles and books to draw on, and take notes which you organize according to those headings.
I see.
Then put short phrases and sentences as bullet points under each heading. Make sure that this skeleton makes sense and flows properly before writing up the paper in full.
Okay.
Joe, you know I'm giving a presentation in our film studies class next week?
Yes.
Well, could we discuss it? I could do with getting someone else's opinion.
Of course, Katie. What are you going to talk about?
It's about film adaptations of Shakespeare's plays. I've got very interested in all the different approaches that film directors take.
Uh-huh.
So I thought I'd start with Giannetti, who's a professor of film and literature, and in one of his books he came up with a straightforward classification of film adaptations based on how faithful they are to the original plays and novels.
Right.
I've already made some notes on that, so I just need to sort those out before the presentation. I thought that next I'd ask the class to come up with the worst examples of Shakespeare adaptations that they've seen, and to say why. That should be more fun than having their favourite versions.
Yes, I can certainly think of a couple.
Right. Next, I want to talk about Rachel Malco. I came across something on the internet about her work on film adaptations, and I was thinking of showing some film clips to illustrate her ideas.
Will you have enough time, though, both to prepare and during the presentation? After all, I doubt if you'll be able to find all the clips you want.
Perhaps you're right. OK, well, I'd better do some slides instead, saying how various films relate to what she says. That should encourage discussion. Next, I want to say something about how plays may be chosen for adaptation because they're concerned with issues of the time when the film is made.
You mean things like patriotism or the role of government?
Exactly. It's quite tricky, but I've got a few ideas I'd like to discuss. And finally, I want to talk about a few adaptations that I think illustrate a range of approaches and make some comments on them. Do you know the Japanese film Ran?
I haven't seen it. It was based on Shakespeare's King Lear, wasn't it?
That's right. It was a very loose adaptation, using the same situation and story, but moving it to 16th century Japan instead of 16th century Britain. So, for example, the king's daughters become sons, because in Japanese culture at that time, women couldn't succeed to the throne.
OK. I hope you're going to talk about the 1993 film of Much Ado About Nothing. I think that's one of the best Shakespeare films. It really brings the play to life, doesn't it?
Yes, I agree. And I think filming it in Italy, where the play is set, makes you see what life was like at the time of the play.
Absolutely. Right, what's next?
Next, I thought Romeo and Juliet, the 1996 film, which moves the action into the present day.
Yes, it worked really well, I thought, changing the two feuding families in the original to two competing business empires, even though they're speaking in the English of the original play.
You'd expect it would sound really bizarre, but I found I soon got used to it.
Me too.
Then I thought I'd include a real Hollywood film, one that's intended to appeal to a mass commercial audience.
There must be quite a number of those.
Yes, but I've picked the 1996 film of Hamlet. It included every line of the text, but it's more like a typical action hero movie. There are loads of special effects, but no unifying interpretation of the play.
All show and no substance.
Exactly. Then there's Prospero's books, based on The Tempest. That was really innovative from a stylistic point of view.
Didn't it include dance and singing and animation as well as live actors?
Yes, it did. I also want to mention Looking for Richard. Did you ever see it?
No, but I've read about it. It was a blend of a documentary with a few scenes from Richard III, wasn't it?
That's right. It's more a way of looking into how people nowadays connect with the playwright. The play is really just the starting point. And that'll be where I finish.
Well, it sounds as though it'll be very interesting.